Hey gamers, if you like roguelike or roguelite games, then you've come to the right place. Today I'm going to show you top 17 best roguelike games that will be your Games of the Year 2026. Actually, this isn't final yet because I know a few really good roguelike games are still dropping later this year. But for now, here's the list of games that are shaping up to be the best roguelike games of the year. So without further ado, let's get started. If you've played HUNTDOWN, you already get why it ended up as a cult favorite in the run-and-gun space. In HUNTDOWN over time, that whole formula gets flipped into a roguelite direction. It's not a straight mission-to-mission ride anymore. You drop in, get taken out, come back, upgrade, then push deeper into a world that keeps getting less forgiving. That change split the community. A lot of players are into it because it's way more replayable, and the build variety opens up a lot, from close-range setups to bullet builds that bounce all over the place. On the other side, some still prefer the original HUNTDOWN for being simpler and just getting straight to the action without all the extra systems layered on top. A lot of players are saying the game is already in a solid spot even for early access. Before we continue with the list, I want to say thank you to Aboveland Rhapsody for sponsoring this video. Aboveland Rhapsody is a new co-op action roguelite for up to 3 players. Set in a sky world of floating islands and ancient ruins, the game follows a world fractured by a mysterious disaster known as the Damnation. Now I know what you're thinking. Great, another roguelite. But hold on, because while most games give you swords and bows, this one lets you beat the crap out of monsters with folding chairs, guitars, basketballs, dice, yo-yos, fireworks, drones, and all kinds of ridiculous nonsense. And no, they're not lazy joke weapons either. Every weapon actually plays differently and can completely change the way your run unfolds. The whole game is built around experimenting with builds. There are hundreds of perks to combine, tons of weird synergies to discover, and plenty of opportunities to accidentally create something completely broken. You'll also be joined by a companion that can fight alongside you, summon allies, and even transform into powerful monster forms. So if you're into co-op roguelites, weird weapons, and making absurdly overpowered builds, Aboveland Rhapsody deserves a spot on your wishlist. And yup, the game is currently planned to launch on Steam later this year, so don't forget to wishlist Aboveland Rhapsody through the link in the description, and experience this amazing co-op action roguelike that will blow your mind. Alright then, let's get back to the list. 33 Immortals has a co-op roguelite concept that feels genuinely different from anything else out there. Up to 33 players can jump into the same map, fight against the forces of heaven, gather resources, clear smaller dungeons, and eventually take down massive bosses together. There are 8 classes to choose from, each built around its own unique weapon. Once you've picked your class, you're dropped into a huge map, packed with dozens of other players. Everyone is scrambling for resources, opening chests, clearing mini-dungeons, and working toward unlocking the path to the next boss. Having so many players in a single run creates an experience you just don't see very often in the genre. The raids feel alive, the revive system keeps players involved instead of leaving them stuck watching from the sidelines, and every major fight delivers the kind of scale you'd normally expect from an MMO. Arms of God is a roguelite bullet heaven with a religious theme, mixing Vampire Survivors style gameplay with a light Doom influence. You pick one of 10 characters and fight through waves of demons using sacred weapons and powers. The core is the build system. Every upgrade has upsides and downsides, so you're forced to adapt each run instead of just stacking power mindlessly. It keeps you engaged whether you want it or not. During runs, you complete basic objectives like opening chests or grabbing flags to gain resources. Those feed back into the cathedral where you unlock new weapons, blessings, and permanent upgrades. Progression in early access is a bit slow, but the unlocks and build variety still make repeated runs worth it. Visually, it holds up well for a solo dev project, with solid combat effects, clean UI, and readable enemies even when things get crowded. TerraTech Legion drops into an already saturated survivors-like genre, but it doesn't just follow the formula. The main difference is you're not only upgrading a character, you're building your own war machine. Every attachment affects handling, not just damage. Stability, turning, and control all change depending on how you build. If you place parts carelessly, your build might look strong on paper but feel terrible to control in practice. It feels like playing Lego, except everything you attach is a weapon. The boost system also changes things per character. Some ram through enemies like a tank, others phase through them like physics doesn't matter. Each one plays differently, not just cosmetically. The reason you keep coming back isn't because it's another Survivor's like, but because every run becomes a different build experiment. Cinderia is a 2.5D dark fantasy roguelite in early access on March 30th, 2026. It comes with a lot of content on paper, 4 characters, hundreds of skills, items, upgrades, 5 chapters, and 8 bosses. The numbers are big, but it's early access, so balance and actual usefulness of all that content is still questionable. The core of the game is the Ember Fusion system. You collect embers during a run and combine them with skills to change how they work. This is where the game stands out. If you don't experiment, builds feel flat. If you do, the depth starts to show. Combat is fast, with a 2.5D view that keeps things readable even when the screen gets crowded. Skill and boss animations clearly get priority. It's ambitious for an early access roguelite, packing a lot of systems and variety from the start, but that also means balance issues are very likely, since more systems usually mean more things that can go wrong. Temtem Swarm takes the Temtem universe and mixes it with a survivor-like roguelite. It works better than expected and comes out as a solid action roguelite that blends both identities without clashing. At its core, it's still a survivor-like, but progression feels more directed. You're not just picking random upgrades, you start shaping your build early on. Every Tem plays differently, so each run has a clear direction instead of just stacking whatever shows up. In co-op with up to 3 players, it gets more dynamic since players can split roles like damage, crowd control, or support. The mid-run evolution system is the highlight. Your character starts weak, then gradually turns into a screen-clearing powerhouse. Traits, gear, and ultimates all connect in a way that makes the build feel like it naturally develops throughout the run. Everything is Crab is a roguelite, where you start as a tiny blob, eat your way up, level up, and slowly turn into some weird mutated creature with random body parts you end up stacking. The whole visual progression thing is the main hook. Every upgrade actually shows on your character, so you're not just getting stronger on paper, you're literally watching your monster evolve into something unhinged. On paper, it feels like a living ecosystem. In reality, runs start to feel repetitive pretty fast. Enemy scaling is linear, and the world variation doesn't change much beyond basic terrain swaps. Build options look wide. You can go full Predator, Scavenger style, or mess around with niche stuff like charm-based setups. The real strength is still build experimentation. Every run, you can push a different evolution path, and that curiosity of what happens if I commit to this route is what keeps it dragging you back in. Pax Autocratica is basically a mix of 2 core gameplay styles. You act as the ruler of a colony on an alien planet, and you also jump straight into fast-paced roguelike FPS combat. On the colony side, you manage people, build facilities, and set policies that can either keep your population obedient or push them toward rebellion. It's all wrapped in a satirical tone about control and power structures. On the other side, you leave the colony to run combat missions where you shoot enemies, clear objectives, and gather resources that feed back into upgrading both your character and your colony. At its core, the game is about running a system from the top while also fighting on the ground yourself, with both layers constantly feeding into each other. Honestly, it hasn't even released yet, but it already shows a lot of potential. If they actually nail the balance between the colony sim and the FPS roguelike parts, this could easily end up being one of the standout titles in the roguelike genre that year. LORT feels like someone asked, what if we took Risk of Rain 2, cranked up the chaos, made it way goofier, and let 8 people play together? And yeah, that's pretty much exactly what this game is. You've got exploration, combat, a bit of resource management as you farm gold for chests, and a big boss waiting at the end of every run. The whole thing is wrapped in a laid-back, goofy fantasy world. Hell, there's even a pistol, and it feels hilariously out of place, in the best way. If you're looking for a co-op roguelike to mess around with your friends, this is absolutely worth checking out. That said, let's be real, it's still in early access. There are only 4 playable characters right now, the content isn't huge yet, and it's definitely not fully cooked. Even so, it's already a damn fun game with enough replay value to keep you and your friends coming back for more. Morbid Metal is a fast-paced, melee action roguelite. Its biggest hook is the ability to swap between characters instantly during combat. Each one has a different playstyle and skill set, letting you chain long combos without killing the flow of the fight. The roguelite formula is pretty familiar, but the character switching mechanic keeps the combat feeling more dynamic than a lot of games in the genre. That said, the early access build still has some rough edges. Some animations leave you wide open after using certain abilities, performance can tank during busy fights, and runs feel a bit too long because there isn't enough arena variety yet. After a while, getting back to the boss starts feeling repetitive. If you're already into roguelites, this is definitely one to keep an eye on in early access. But if you're just getting into the genre, there are better games to start with. Rotwood is a beat-em-up roguelite that leans way harder into melee combat and co-op than complicated procedural exploration. The roguelite formula is still pretty familiar, but the pacing is faster and honestly feels a lot better when you're playing with friends. Combat is easily the main attraction here. You've got 5 weapon types: hammers, bows, spears, strikers, and cannons. So finding a build that fits your playstyle isn't a problem. The upgrades do more than just slap bigger numbers onto your character. You can absolutely play solo since enemy scaling adjusts to your party size. But let's be real, Rotwood is built with multiplayer in mind. Co-op is where the game really shines. Everyone gets their own loot and upgrades, and boss fights become way more fun when the group can split responsibilities instead of one poor bastard trying to handle everything alone. The Spell Brigade sits right in that overcrowded survivor-like space, so let's not pretend it's reinventing anything. It follows the same core loop as games like Vampire Survivors. You move around, attacks happen automatically, enemies swarm harder and harder, and you slowly snowball into a walking damage engine. That's it. There are 15 unlockable characters, and each run lets you pick one and build out a spell loadout through level ups. Sounds flexible on paper, but in practice, the early game variety is held back by slow progression. So it takes a while before anything actually opens up or feels meaningfully different. The game is clearly built around co-op. A lot of systems lean into teamwork, revives, healing boosts, and synergy bonuses, so solo play ends up feeling more punishing and honestly a bit dry compared to playing with others. Lost Castle 2 is basically a follow-up to Lost Castle, a game that already had a solid player base, especially in Asia. So this isn't some fresh-out-of-nowhere title, it's more like a heavier, more content-packed evolution of the original beat-em-up roguelite co-op formula. Story-wise, don't expect anything deep. It's just a setup, so you've got a reason to keep going. You're a treasure hunter, you walk into a cursed castle and surrounding areas, and a bunch of weird enemies and entities fill the place. That's it. In co-op, you can team up, split roles, or just run around with your friends and deal with whatever the game throws at you together. That said, once the screen gets crowded with effects, enemies, and players, it can get visually messy, especially when you're running with a full squad. But honestly, that's also part of why it hits harder in co-op. More enemies on screen just makes the whole thing feel more intense and fun to deal with. If you've already cleared both Hades and Hades 2 and you're looking for something similar, Realm of Ink sits right in that same lane. It follows the same foundation pretty closely: run structure, dash-based movement, room-to-room combat, and mid-run upgrades. Combat is fast and responsive, clearly made for high-tempo action, but compared to what Hades 2 or other modern roguelites already deliver, it feels more like consistent, comfortable gameplay rather than standout encounters. The strongest part is the meta progression. Foxblood, Jade Ink, and character forms give you a layered sense of growth where your playstyle can shift significantly between runs. That's the main hook, even if the dungeon variety doesn't change much. The Endless Mode is basically post-game content for people who want to keep pushing their build further rather than something deeply designed around variety. BlazBlue Entropy Effect X is not the BlazBlue you remember from the old fighting game era. If you're coming in expecting that vibe, you're already on the wrong track. This one originally dropped on PC first, then later made its way over to PS5 and Xbox Series in 2026, so it's not some random port job. It actually expanded into consoles afterward. You're playing as a robot stuck inside a post-apocalyptic simulation controlled by a mysterious AI. The BlazBlue characters are here, but honestly, don't come in expecting deep lore relevance. That's not the point. The combat is where it actually earns attention. It's fast, clean, and responsive. You're juggling enemies in the air, pulling them in with special attacks, dashing around, slamming them down, and chaining combos that can get pretty wild once you get into the rhythm. Every run gives you new skills or upgrades, so your build keeps shifting. That's what keeps the loop going, not any story attachment. In the original Deep Rock Galactic, the strength isn't just shooting. What makes it work is teamwork that feels messy and dynamic. Every class has its own tools, and players constantly have to coordinate just to survive. Mining, carving tunnels, building escape routes, and dealing with unexpected chaos all happen naturally because of how the roles and maps interact. That's what separates it from most co-op shooters. In Deep Rock Galactic Rogue Core, that feel gets turned into something more standard. The mission loop is repetitive: enter the mine, push objectives, defend the elevator, repeat until a boss appears. Compared to roguelites like Risk of Rain 2, the contrast is clear. That game lets build scale into something extreme and unpredictable. Rogue Core keeps progression tightly controlled, so instead of feeling powerful over time, the pacing leans more towards slow grind. Early access players are mostly hoping for more mission variety and deeper build systems in future updates.
Even with all the danger, we still have to get the deposit.
Saros is a roguelike that still carries the same third-person shooter DNA as Returnal, but it cuts out a lot of the stuff that used to slow the pacing down. Where Returnal leans heavily into pressure and pure survival, Saros is more about momentum. You're constantly running, shooting, dodging, dying, and jumping back in again, but this isn't your typical grind your build and chill roguelike. Every fight feels like the screen is getting flooded with bullets, lasers, and weird alien projectiles coming from every direction, because death is part of progression, not a hard stop. One of the biggest changes is the removal of the active reload mechanic. Instead of breaking your rhythm with a timing-based reload that can mess you up, Saros replaces it with a shield system. Holding up your shield lets you absorb incoming enemy fire, and that energy gets converted into power for your alt-fire attacks. It sounds simple, but it changes everything. And that's it for today. Those are the top roguelike or roguelite games that look set to be the games of the year in 2026. Got a hidden gem I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video or discovered a new title to add to your collection, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss future content. Once again, if you want to buy games with cheap price, the link in the description, okay? So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.